Hello and welcome back to our series of lectures on responding to world religions. I want to look today at some different types of religions and try to fit some of the major religions into some of these categories. We start with the first one. It's called animism. It comes from the word anima, which means spirit. And so this would be a religious system that includes the idea that spirits inhabit inanimate objects and phenomena. And so somebody who is animist would see a strong overlap between the spiritual and the natural world, as the spiritual world doesn't just interact, but is actually part of the natural world. In many major religions, there can be a strong component of animism, including folk Christianity, folk Islam, folk Buddhism, some systems that would not be considered animist. However, many times people put in animistic practices or thinking as well. The next type is polytheism, with the word poly, which means many. And so this is the idea that the universe is governed by a variety of gods. And if you're familiar with Greek or Roman mythology, this would be polytheism. Or Hinduism as well has a lot of elements, well, it is polytheism with other elements added as well. Then there, in fact, actually, Islam frequently thinks of Christianity as being a polytheistic religion with the belief in three gods. Then there's pantheism, from the word pan, which means all. And so this is the belief that a spirit fills the universe. In a sense, God is the universe, and the universe is God. Perhaps a contemporary understanding of this might be something similar to what you see in Star Wars with the Force, where the Force is equated with the universe. And although the Force is impersonal, it still fills the universe and, in a sense, controls what happens around it. Then there's deism. And so this is the belief in a distant, uninvolved God who may have created the universe to begin with, but now stands back and doesn't really interact with his creation or her creation. And so going back into Greek philosophy, this would be the Epicureans who saw God, although God was matter like everything else, made up of atoms. God was neutral and didn't really involve himself or itself in the rest of the universe. Thomas Jefferson was a famous deist, and actually, I think many Western Christians, be they in Europe or in America, frequently also are functional deists. They may believe in God, they may actually even believe that God created the universe, but then they treat God as if he is distant and not really involved in day-to-day life. And of course, most of us would be familiar with three major religions that are monotheistic. And so monotheism is the belief that there is one creator God. The universe is governed by this single, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent spiritual being. And so the major religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all monotheistic religions that believe in one God. And of course, obviously, you can find some people who might believe slightly differently, but overall, these three religions are considered to be monotheistic. Beside monotheism, though, and between monotheism and polytheism, is something called dualism, where there's a belief that the universe is governed by two uh, nearly equally matched forces of good and evil. One of the best examples of this is a fairly old religion called Zoroastrianism, present in Persia and in that part of the Middle East, that believed in almost equal forces of good and evil that govern the universe. And then in the same part of the world, in our era from the 3rd century to about the 7th century, there was a major religion called Manichaeism, which also thought the same thing, that there were two equally, almost equal anyway, forces of good and evil. I've also included in this Confucianism with a question mark. And the question mark is because many people wonder, is Confucianism a religion or is it a philosophy? It's both, really, in my opinion. Partially, if we look at, especially if we look at religion with the idea that it's a system of belief that governs how we act or how we treat other people, and that definitely fits Confucianism. Now, with Confucianism, then there's another question mark with that because Confucianism has a very strong emphasis on two opposing forces, yin and yang. But of course, they aren't necessarily good and evil. They're simply two faces of something. So there's a dualistic part there, not necessarily a dualism that reflects in good and evil. Then finally, there's two other types that we see a lot of crossover in many religions, and they can actually exist alongside each other. But the first is asceticism. And so this would be the belief or practice that enlightenment or a close relationship with deity is obtained by an extreme denial of normal worldly pleasures and possessions. And so historically in the West, this has been associated with monasteries, with monks, the desert fathers, for instance, nuns. A great example of an extreme version, perhaps, of asceticism would be Jainism in India. But you can see asceticism in many different religions around the world, including in Christianity and Islam and Judaism. Then there's mysticism. And so this is the belief or practice that sees enlightenment and spiritual power coming through different mystic practices, behaviors, contemplation, meditation, or a direct personal experience of God. In some cases, this enlightenment is gained through the use of drugs, drumming, dancing, something that provides us into a different state of being or in a different state of consciousness that supposedly allows us to experience then the divine. In some ways, Pentecostal Christianity fits in this as being a mystic form of Christianity. In Islam, you would have the jinns. And in many Eastern religions also, you will have something that relates to this as far as a mystic understanding of the religion. So these are some different types of religions that perhaps will help you understand how some of them are different or similar from or similar to one another, and we'll be looking at them as we move forward.